Hi, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of the Manufacturing IT podcast. I'm joined today by Remus Pop. Remus, I've followed your career for quite a while, so delighted to have you on the podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for the invite, Daniel. I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
Oh, good. Well, look, really keen to talk and hear about your insights. As I say, I've followed you for quite a while. So, look, tell everyone a little bit about who you are, Remus, what you do, and where you do it.
Sure. So my name, like you said, is Remus Pop. I'm the technical director of our Intelligent Manufacturing Solutions group here at Riveron. Riveron is a national business advisory firm focusing on a number of different areas and serving a number of different industries and clients. My group specifically within the Riveron umbrella focuses on manufacturing. So what we do is help our clients that are looking to understand the value from a business perspective of what we can do with technology. So if you think about traditionally what we've been doing in our space of deploying MES systems and building out OEE dashboards and connecting PLCs, all that type of stuff that we've been doing for a number of years, there's been a really big focus lately on the business value of that data. So what my team does is really help companies understand the business value of that data, both from a technology perspective of deploying solutions within a factory to the business transformation piece of it. So we have a team dedicated to the operations side of the practice that helps customers understand how to change your startup meeting in the morning so that your maintenance team understands where they can pull downtime information from, or how to access data at different levels of the organization so that we can really understand how to impact our manufacturing environment. The way we kind of look at it is we build systems that deliver information to the people that can act upon it the fastest. Sometimes that person is an operator, and the type of data that they needed might be different than a supervisor, which is different than the plant manager, different from the CFO, COO, all the way up to the CEO, right? Everybody needs data to do their job. Our job is to kind of facilitate that data access.
No, that's a really, really good insight. And I know you covered a lot of ground there. And in your intro, Remus, you kind of covered a lot of the topics that I want to discuss. And I think from our conversations earlier, before we went live on this episode, some of the bits and pieces that you mentioned, combining business value with technology, it's a really interesting evaluation of the space. People are becoming a lot more savvy with not just implementing technology for technology's sake, but what's the business case? What's the operational change needed to make that a success?
Right. If you understand the Gartner hype curve, right, I think we're past the initial phases, and we're kind of into that idea of like we've done pilots, we've executed some proof of values and some concepts. Now we're at the point of like, okay, we did that pilot. Now what do we do, right? Yeah. Do we scale it across the organization? And the only way to get that buy-in to do scale is to show value, right? We can't just spend a couple $100,000 on a technology project and not show any value, because it's not going to go anywhere. So really, what we've seen in the last little bit is really a gap in the marketplace of companies that can really understand how to show that value, right? Demonstrate the ROI of these types of projects that we take on.
No, that's a good point, and something definitely prevalent at the moment. So look, I just wanted to get your take on, I know you're someone who likes to cut through, not use buzzwords and kill the jargon. So look, tell me what your thoughts are on a smart factory. What does a smart factory look like? Do many companies have a smart factory? And from where do many companies who think they've got a smart factory have a smart factory?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think for me, we'll start with what I think a smart factory is, and if you tie the buzzword to it of the Industry 4.0 jargon, it's the cyber physical system, right? Explained for me, I think that's just the connection of equipment for the purposes of delivering that information, right? Kind of like what I touched on earlier is understanding that there's value in the information, presenting that in a format that somebody can understand and act upon it in a number of different ways, and then combining that data to automate the exchange of it with other systems, right? Yeah. So there's valuable information from an assembly line, there's valuable information from an ERP system, from a warehouse management system, production ordering system. So all these different silos of data have really good information. And if we can combine all that data into something that we can present to someone that can make a decision on it, that's what I think is the smart factory is. Now you can get into all the other additional stuff there of, AGVs and automated lights out facilities and all that type of stuff. And there's value in all of that type of stuff. What my group specifically focuses on is on that information piece, right? We're really the Industry 4.0 connected asset to the point of understanding information. That's kind of where I look at the smart factory lens from. If I think about customers that have gone down that journey, and there are certainly a good number of them, I would say very few have really realized that vision. And I think that's kind of a common theme that you see in a lot of posts on LinkedIn and a lot of webinars and stuff like that. Is there's a lot of companies have done pilots and have started the initiative and started to understand the impact to the organization, but I would say very few that I've seen have actually built a true, real smart factory.
Yeah,
I'm sure they're out there. I just haven't seen them. I mean, typically we get engaged to help customers build that smart factory. So we're not getting hired by the ones that already have it. So
yeah, no, fair point on that. And from your vantage point, then, are you seeing specific sectors that are more adaptable to that change, more primed for that change, and then opposite, the ones that are a little bit more resistant to that change?
Yeah, if I look through my background, right, with traditionally being based in the Detroit area, the majority of my background was in automotive, right? I've served a number of different automotive clients through the years, both as an engineer and then up through the world of MES deployments and IT type roles. So if you would have asked me a few years ago where I thought the majority of my work would be in automotive. And then what I would say is over the last few years, I'd say I'd served very little automotive customers as we've started this consulting engagement. We've seen industries from energy to CPG to specialty chemical, pulp and paper. Everybody can benefit from access to data. So the level of customers that we serve now are something I never would have guessed 3 years ago. It's really been interesting to see, and all sorts of sizes too. We serve mom and pop shops all the way to global enterprises with 200 plus sites. So it's really interesting to see that there's value for all types of organizations. It's really exciting to be part of this space right now.
No, definitely. And look, from my vantage points of I guess from the outside looking in and helping people find new roles and careers within smart manufacturing industry 4.0, whichever buzzword we use, it's fascinating to see the evolution of the space. So you said something interesting there, that you see kind of both ends of the scales, that super large enterprise, but also the smaller mom and pop shops. I think you used that's how I like that. Which of those companies is more exciting to work for? The smaller ones where the ROI savings, cost benefits would be astronomical to their growth and prosperity, or do you enjoy that like complex navigation of them huge big ones where when you win big?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I have to reflect on it, thinking about which one I enjoy more. I think they both present opportunities and challenges. What I would say the challenge from enterprise customers that we deal with is navigating the political landscape of IT and all the different sort of issues that come up with that, right? Because now we're bringing that level of connectivity down to a realm that traditionally IT organizations don't understand, right? So they don't understand the control network and the way PLCs operate and send data, and how that level of data needs to be now connected to their network, and then all the cybersecurity implications around that. So I don't enjoy that part of it when we're dealing with the enterprise, but I do enjoy seeing the culture of an organization that size shift to understand that there is a better way to operate their facility. So that part I really like to see. When you can get the buy-in from the different stakeholders, you can really see some really cool stuff. On the flip side of that, the reason I really enjoy working with the smaller type of manufacturing environments is that they're much more open to change, right? It's hard to get that culture shift in an enterprise client, but in a smaller customer, they're very eager, they're very hungry, they don't have any preconceived notions of the way things have been done for 40 years. They don't have all these processes in place that limit them from being able to be agile in this new space. One of the things that we talk about a lot, and it's a common theme with anybody that talks about this space, is that you're going to fail along the way with some sort of one of these initiatives. The idea is that you have to fail fast and move on quickly, right?
Fail forward.
That's a very difficult thing to do at an enterprise level, but at a smaller company, we get to do that a lot. And the value that we generate, I would say, proportionally is equal in both. We just get to realize it, I think, a little bit faster in a smaller customer.
Yeah. And the other thing that I find fascinating at this moment is the speed of advancement in technology. And look, I know we need to put technology to work, and it's not just about implementing tech for the sake of it and all of that good stuff. But what are your thoughts on maybe the smaller companies, mid-sized companies, future-proofing their tech investment? And the way I see the space really fascinating at the moment, where you've got the big established players, you've got the more kind of nimble, agile companies coming through, and there seems to be a bit of a break, a bit of a disconnect, I guess, in terms of how companies are selling licenses and whether it's purely on-prem or cloud and that stuff. But how can companies future-proof their tech investment to make sure that they continue, not tied into long contracts and all of that ugly stuff?
Yeah, it's another great question. I think one of the biggest things that we try to help our customers focus on when they're selecting, the platform of which they're going to build their digital factory on is the concept of openness, right? Mm-hmm. Transparency, openness, interconnectivity, because more and more data is becoming available from these different sorts of traditional endpoints, and so you want to make sure that the solution that you provide is going to be open to that connectivity across the board, right? Yeah. So if I have this type of ERP system in this plant, and then maybe another type of ERP system in this plant, and then a plant over here that doesn't even have an ERP system, right? So we have to make sure that the platform that we select is kind of capable of accommodating those multiple different things. I think is a big part of it. Understanding the infrastructure implication is another big piece, right? Do we want to spend the capital expenditure on building out servers and things like that are going to support this type of initiative, right? So. Yeah. A really great example is a customer that we recently did a project with in Middle America, smaller, much smaller company than an enterprise, but they didn't want to spend the money on buying an entirely new server infrastructure for the facility, right? They wanted to take advantage of what's available in cloud. So what we did with them is we hosted their entire environment on the cloud. So their entire IIoT platform and everything that they're doing, from reporting to operator interface, is all hosted on Azure. There's some connectivity in the plant that allows us to give that kind of local level access, and we can do that kind of second by second data gets aggregated locally, and then all gets sent up to do reporting and interfacing at a higher level. And for a cost of, I think for this customer, it was around $20,000 a year. They don't have to manage any of that. It's a contained service. They don't have to hire staff to run their Kubernetes cluster or understand how to, make sure their database servers have enough memory and storage and all that. It's all just managed for them. So it frees them up to focus on the things that might be more important to them.
Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense. And look, I guess away from manufacturing, a lot of other industries have taken advantage of cloud infrastructure. And I guess manufacturing's a harder square to circle on that for obvious reasons. But are you finding more companies now are open to kind of moving down cloud infrastructure routes and hosting a lot of their stuff in the cloud?
Absolutely. And I think a big shift of that lately has been this idea of hybrid cloud. So I think there's still a very big necessity in manufacturing to keep some level of compute on-prem for a number of different reasons, right? Traceability, government requirements, ITAR, FDA type stuff. So I think there's still a necessity for on-prem in certain manufacturing customers. But I think the ability of combining that with cloud, I think, is what's really changed the idea for manufacturing customers to really take advantage of cloud, is because now we can do a little bit of both. We can have the best of both worlds.
No, that makes sense. And I think just want to go back to a point where you kind of mentioned earlier, that classic convergence of IT, OT, and that resistance to change, understanding either side from there, classic MES challenge and headache that you face, no doubt. But from my background in recruiting around MES, and that's largely within kind of pharma and biotech, the four kind of major stakeholders are typically IT, automation, quality, and what areas are you finding that are the main stakeholders in the manufacturing sectors that you cover?
Yeah, I would say the majority of our engagements start being led by the operations team. Yeah. So the operations team are trying to solve problems, and they're looking at technology as a tool to solve those problems. And I think almost immediately, once the engagement starts, all the IT implications start to roll into that. So IT gets involved almost immediately. And then from what we've seen historically is that IT then starts to take ownership of the effort, right? They start to realize that OT is definitely converging onto IT, and they want to make sure that they are protected. They're protecting the company. They're protecting the company's data. So we typically see that the engagements start from operations, but very, very often get handed over and led by IT shortly after that. Not always the case, but certainly what I see most commonly.
No, that makes sense. And again, just to evolve that point, obviously with the level of investment that, we're talking about and the engagements that you're typically involved in, you need executive level commitment and buy-in. And, naturally the evolution, maybe the last 5, 6, 7 years, the roles I've seen have opened up is chief digital officer, information officer. What are the key stakeholders at the kind of executive level that, you're finding that you're now bumping into and rubbing up against in these conversations?
That's great. A really good one of that is the office of the CFO, right? Now, as especially in the way the market is today, I think there's a lot more focus on getting the most out of the assets we own currently. And so what we've bumped up to quite a bit, and I think one of the reasons that we've been very successful at Riveron is that we serve the office of the CFO very well. So we very much understand the value of the data, and we can put numbers to it, right? We can say that if you increase your manufacturing operations by X percentage in certain level of characteristics, that's going to tie directly to X percentage of EBITDA. And so when we start talking that language to CFOs, they get very excited, and we gain a level of trust by the group that signs the paycheck, right? So we've definitely seen a lot more interest from that C-level role lately. We've seen a lot of success being able to have that conversation at that level with that type of role has been really great for us.
No, that's really interesting. And I guess, I know you mentioned before some of the background of Riveron and that kind of advisory around financial services as well. So that kind of makes sense to tie in, with the language of the CFO. So look, one of the key things I'm always keen to pick people's brains on, and this is for the help of the audience, if you were to pick three ways, Remus, in which you could fail at your smart factory, let's call it transformation, it's a lovely word. If you could pick 3 ways to make sure you were to fail at it, what would be the 3, biggest ways that you could jam up your program?
Neglecting the foundation, right? So we see a lot of customers that get interested in this Industry 4.0 digital factory initiative, and the first thing they want to start with is AI, right? So they try to tackle, a concept that they're so far away from achieving without understanding that you have to build the foundation first, right? There's not a single customer that we walk into that every machine in their company is connected and providing data. And for whatever reason, they seem to neglect the understanding that the single most difficult thing that I think we do in this space is actually connect equipment. It is very difficult to connect a 1985 CNC machine that's been running since, the dawn of time, or World War II era equipment in some cases, right? There's the general level of connectivity in a plant from what we've seen is very low, right? If you walk into a new greenfield facility and they have all brand new Rockwell PLCs, you're not going to have a problem pulling in all that data, right? It's really easy to connect to those and suck up all that information. But when you walk into a customer that's been operating since the early 1900s, and they might have a factory in the middle America that's been around since World War II and literally still have equipment from that era running in that plant, but they want to try to gain some insight. So it's not that you can't, it's just understanding that there's a value to data ratio, right? Understanding how much money do you want to spend to get to that data and how much data is enough. So I'd say that one is the biggest one, neglecting the foundation. Number 2 is trying to what's the common phrase? Trying to boil the ocean, right? Don't try to do everything all at once, right? Pick an initiative, pick a target area that you want to focus on as an organization, and do that. And then that parallel is really good with, I think, the third failure point is you have to solve a problem. Like you mentioned earlier, right? You don't want to deploy technology just for the sake of it, because it's not going to go anywhere. It's going to fail. You have to try to solve a problem, right? There's not a single organization out there that doesn't have a problem, right? Pick one and solve it. And then that'll kind of help you define what this strategy is going to be for your company. Because as you solve one problem, another problem will pop up. And you'll go solve that one. And then another problem will pop up. It's an ever continuous cycle, and that will help you define your strategy. And I'll add a fourth one just for the sake of it, is to have a strategy, right? Don't just fly by the it doesn't have to be a concrete strategy, but at least have some idea of what you want to do as a company.
Yeah, no, I think they're four great points, and what I'll do, I'll kind of clip those up, and we can share those out as well, because I think it's always
Yeah,
great
that'd be great.
to have that forefront in people's minds. And look, one of the other things I was curious on your background. Obviously studying controls, or it looks like from what I can see,
Yeah.
controls background, moving into MES and kind of doing what you're doing now. But obviously, you've probably heard that term Industry 4.0, years back. What's your interpretation of the changing understanding of that term? When it first came out, it was a cool buzzword, but
Yeah.
what do you think is your interpretation, understanding of kind of how that's changed over the last, half decade?
Yeah, I remember when I first heard the term, and it was talking about connecting machines to store data in like a database, and I was
Mm,
like, we've been doing that for 20 years. That's not new. What do you mean Industry 4.0? So I think what has encapsulated Industry 4.0 is the influx of IT technology into the manufacturing space,
mm,
right? Because what we were doing before was adapting operations technology to kind of fit some IT systems, right? We were taking PLC data, we were storing it in a database, but it wasn't an IT system. It
mm.
wasn't, built like an IT system is. But I think what's really changed the Industry 4.0 landscape is that there's been a lot more interest from technology companies to build solutions for manufacturing, right? You see
Yeah.
it with Snowflake's recent launch with cloud for manufacturing. You see it with Microsoft. You see it with AWS, right?
Oracle.
Every one of
Yeah.
those big
Mm.
IT companies is getting really interested in what's happening in manufacturing. And that's kind of really shed the light on this Industry 4.0 concept.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the biggest thing, is just that influx of different technology companies seeing that there's value in this space and kind of building solutions for manufacturing.
Yeah, and I guess separating that concrete side of the business to the carpenter side of the business, there's a lot more of a
Exactly. Yeah,
connection now.
right, exactly.
And so, look, to evolve that, what's your thoughts on the term Industry 5.0? Are you hearing that much? Look, I'm hearing a little bit.
Yeah, I've seen it brought up a couple of points, and I think there are so few companies that are on, I would call Industry 4.0 companies. I think to start, it's always going to be there, right? It's just a natural evolution of things, right? We started with
Yeah.
Industry 1 with steam power and mechanization, and we went into automation and assembly lines, and we went to, robotics and computerized automation, and now we're in this space. I think eventually we'll be at Industry 5.
Yeah.
I don't know what that would be. Probably
Chat GBT doing everything.
yeah, accidentally muted myself. Yeah, I think that would probably be a big part of what Industry 5 will be, is generative AI, Chat GPT, whatever it ends up being in that space. I think Industry 5, and a lot of people would probably call this Industry 4, but just the closed loop system, right? Actually having, it's great in theory to talk about an Industry 4 of having all these systems kind of in this closed loop system, having a factory run itself. But I think that probably realistically isn't capable until we get to that point of, the Chat GPT type of interface, into real understanding that, you can automate some of these decisions and processes and stuff like that. But I mean, it's certainly a real thing that will happen. I don't think we're anywhere close to Industry 5 anytime soon.
No, there's always people who love to make a prediction for the future.
Right.
And look, going back to your background, as I said, from a classic OT world, moving into MES and the journey to where you are now. A lot of my audience are people looking to build their career and maybe already on the same track that you've been on. Can you kind of speak to some of the ways that you think have helped you get to where you are, and maybe some of the key tips you could give to someone who's 5-10 years behind where you are now, with the goal of getting to a role or an insight, a knowledge base where you're at?
Yeah. I mean, for me, the common mantra that I kind of live by is to always challenge myself. So never be comfortable in what I'm doing. It depends on your type of personality, I guess. But if you're really interested in kind of navigating into this space, is you have to be willing to challenge yourself with concepts and ideas that might not be, familiar to you. So the way kind of my entire career into this digital ecosystem started is, like you said, my background was controls engineering. I was developing and deploying automotive assembly lines pretty much for about 8 years. And then I had the opportunity when I worked for a customer, here in Michigan. They went bankrupt and they were bought by a company in China. And we were building a automotive batteries, lithium-ion batteries for EVs. And we were going to migrate a lot of that production to China. But the level of traceability that we had built out with our MES system here in the States had to be replicated in China.
Yeah.
So it was my job then. I kind of volunteered for it to take on that challenge because I wanted the exposure. I wanted to understand more about what MES was doing, how to build a successful MES project, and really start to dive into that space. So I took on the project. I spent 2 years basically living in China. I was back and forth for 2 straight years, spent a lot of time there, but that really shed some light on what was going to be the future of my career, right? Really understanding that IT is absolutely critical to building successful digital factory systems. In my case, it was just MES at the time. But over the next few years, every role that I went to after that was almost half and half. It was half OT, half IT. I typically got brought in to be the bridge, right? People saw my background and they said, you really understand IT, you really understand operations. We want to move down this road. Can you come help us? And so that's kind of where that idea started. And that's kind of how I landed the next couple of roles. If I were to give advice to anybody right now, is to start really looking at cloud technology and how it impacts manufacturing, because more and more of my projects over the last year even have started to migrate so much away from the OT space as far as a technology perspective goes. There's still obviously that critical component of connecting the machine, getting the data, but more and more of those systems are starting to live on the cloud, starting to build out this hybrid architecture, understanding cybersecurity risks and all that type of stuff. So I think that would probably be where I would, advise anybody to focus on. And, you being the recruiter, and we're hiring for a position right now. And if I would have hired for this position 3 years ago, I would have hired a controls focused person to do my digital factory role. Now I am focusing on, I'm looking for a software developer that understands a little bit about manufacturing, as opposed to somebody that really understands manufacturing that knows a little bit about software. So I think it's flipped a little bit on the weight scale to be more software focused now. And I think that's kind of the trend of where this space is going, is we're building out tools that we need to have real understanding of software systems and how to build good software.
That convergence is only going to go stronger, isn't it? And I guess 5-10 years down the line, there maybe won't even be a separation between the two.
I think you're very right. I think there'll be a role that emerges over the next few years. It's already started, I'm sure, in certain places in companies, that a controls engineer, a PLC developer with a full stack deployment and development background, right? Somebody that can literally do it all. I think there's a lot of value in that person. You'll still always have, both sides of it and specialties in each area. But if you want to focus on this digital factory, smart factory, industry 4.0 piece, I think that's the critical part, is you really have to understand manufacturing and you really have to understand software development.
And ChatGPT will take those jobs.
I read something. I don't know how true it is. I was talking to a friend of mine who was at Hanover, and he was talking about that Siemens is looking at releasing ChatGPT into TIA Portal coming up. You'll literally be able to have ChatGPT write your ladder logic for you in some cases, and give you advice on how to write ladder logic. And I think that's obviously only going to grow, right? We're seeing it embedded into Microsoft and all those types of tools. If you follow Walker Reynolds, he's doing a whole series on ChatGPT right now. So I think it's a very interesting topic to look at as this field expands.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know about you, but every email I seem to get is from a company saying, "Great news, we've embedded ChatGPT into our service."
Right, exactly. I can tell you my development team is definitely using ChatGPT and in serving like some menial tasks of porting code over to different platforms and restructuring database tables and stuff like that. So there's definitely interesting to watch.
I've seen some crazy job adverts, and I don't know whether they're tongue in cheek, but for a prompt engineer, I don't know if you've seen those ones as well.
I've definitely seen them.
Crazy. Some pretty good salaries as well. So
it's gonna. I mean, if you look at the generative AI stuff, it's all about the question that you ask the AI engine, right? That's how you get the best response. And I think that understanding how to prompt an AI thing is definitely a role that's gonna grow more and more.
Yeah, 100%. Well, look, we're out of time, Remus. This has been a great episode, and I think there's been tons of value that you've shared, and looking forward to hearing what the audience have got to say about the episode. So look, thanks a million for joining me, and great to have you on the episode.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And anybody that listens and follows, feel free to reach out to me anytime. I love to talk shop. This is an area I'm very passionate about. So happy to be on. Thank you for the invite.
My pleasure.